Hello and welcome to an Ayrshire Film Company special. We've had a number of programmes over the past couple of years, and tonight's programme we're going to be looking at a film made by one of the directors of Ayrshire Film Company, Taylor McInroy, and the topic is looking at domestic abuse under the lockdown. A really controversial topic, but a terrific video that was put out to everybody through the social media, and the reaction has been terrific. And tonight we're going to watch the video, and straight after that you will see our guests there. We'll continue with a wee chat among ourselves, whether it be controversial or whether it be talking about the problems that we do have with COVID and maybe how we can solve some problems. But let's see what we can do. But I think we'll watch that film firstly.
Okay. You'll see that, yeah?
Yep.
Yep, it's coming.
There's something going with you and that guy next door. I've been seeing it for weeks.
No, Chris.
And I haven't seen nothing. I'll throw it away!
You think it's my fault? You know what? I'll just...
Get out of my sight!
Well, in general terms, my area of work is in criminal law and family law. However, during lockdown, the family law side of the business just went through the roof. Lockdown has exacerbated a lot of the issues that go on behind closed doors. However, because of lockdown, families were limited in terms of where they could go for help. So we have been advising mainly women in relation to seeking interdicts from the courts, advising on separation. And a big issue amongst all of that is finances. How do they maintain their family on a day-to-day basis?
It was scary, it was stressful, and I have anxiety, I have depression, so I have been struggling. I've been trying to mask it so that my kids didn't pick up on it, so they didn't get stressed out.
Well, since the lockdown began, we've had to look at the way we work and how we can continue to deliver the services that women and children need. If you think of a woman who's living with an abusive partner right now, she's probably just trying to get through each day and keep the kind of damage and the harm as little as possible. And it's maybe only when there's a little window of opportunity that she'll contact services like us for help. So us and many other services I know are waiting really for a bit of a deluge of inquiries around domestic abuse in the next month or so as things open up a bit. You worry really about, I think I heard a lot of people saying about how this pandemic has actually reinforced a lot of inequalities around income, poverty, all sorts of things, and I think that's true also about relationships between men and women. Domestic abuse exists because there's inequality between men and women, and that's why it's overwhelmingly women that experience it. So you can see on the kind of more negative side that this reinforces some of that as we're going forward. So as a short-term thing, I think we'll have a lot of people need now direct help, but in the long term, I think we really have to keep an eye on what's happening to women and girls nationally and globally to make sure that that negative impact doesn't last for a long time.
To be honest, I don't know where to start. My partner get very, very verbal abusive. It just started from lockdown. He gets really, really moody, and it was the put downs and nothing was good enough for him. They couldn't separate things because obviously the lockdown, and it made it horrible. It made it so much worse because you couldn't go out and you couldn't have a breather from it. I became very isolated. I was in a bedroom for 3 weeks, only coming out the room to get what I needed and stuff. I wasn't speaking to anybody, I wasn't seeing anybody. It got to the stage I didn't know if I was going to wake up the next day, if I was going to, I didn't know. He was very unpredictable with his moods, and he was like flinging things about, and you know, it just got to a stage where I didn't know what he was capable of doing. You know, enough was enough, and I had to phone the police because I was actually scared for my own safety and my son's, because he was very unpredictable.
The councils recognised quite early on that this was going to be the case, that there was going to be this shadow pandemic of domestic abuse. So we've just been quietly working in the background to make sure that we're supporting Women's Aid locally and other organisations to help those experiencing domestic abuse, trying to free up accommodation so that we know if we do have that big demand on services that we can respond really quickly. Because to understand domestic abuse, we have to understand that it's used by abusers for power and control. And if you don't have economic power over your own life, that makes all of that much more to the fore. So, you know, I've recognised that women, by and large, are, you know, the people that are in part-time employment, precarious employment, are the ones that are, you know, still have the caring responsibilities. So if we have, you know, local lockdowns and kids out of school again, etc., we're going to see that, you know, women's ability to be active in the employment market is reduced. All of those things impact on equalities across the board for women. So we, you know, I think we need to make sure that we're going out of this with a clear understanding of that gendered lens that we need to apply as we're creating policy. And that's something that I've been really pushing for at a national level and a local level.
I began making this film in July, just as lockdown was beginning to ease. However, now, in the past few weeks, with restrictions coming back in, I think the message is more relevant than ever. I just want to say thanks again to everyone who made this film possible. Please keep the discussion going online, share it as much as possible, and look out for the next film in the series on the hidden impacts on food provision. Thanks.
It's a terrific video, Taylor. I mean, you've got to be commended for that one. The impact that I've been getting from people saying, you know, the thoughts, and they've actually opened up and said to me that they know people who have been through similar problems, but they won't open up and tell, you know, and try and seek advice and help. I think maybe to kick off, we'll introduce ourselves firstly. My name's Eddie Gemmell. I'm a director with the film company. It's a film company with Taylor. And I'll pass on to Taylor.
Yeah, hi, I'm Taylor. I'm a director alongside Ed at the film company. Obviously, I've been making this film and going out and having good conversations with like yourself, Karen, as well. And I can pass on to you at this point.
Hi, I'm Karen Gardner. I'm the manager of East Ayrshire Women's Aid, which is an organisation that supports women, children and young people who are affected by domestic abuse. So we were really pleased to be working with Taylor and the rest of the company to get the word out there and raise awareness of, as the film says, is what's often a really hidden issue. So thanks for getting us involved.
Hi, I'm Andy Colvin. I'm a community worker with the regeneration team in Kilmarnock Town Centre. I suppose my kind of participation in it is speaking to people like Karen and Taylor and others. This was coming up as an issue kind of thing. So I spoke to Taylor and I thought, is this something we can maybe get more up the agenda? So that's my involvement.
I mean, I'm going to sort of kick off by talking about the hidden agenda, the hidden thing that we seem to be, I mean, it's been going for years and years and years. And you would think in the 21st century now that with social media that things like this could be open and people would be more up for dialogue for people like yourselves to discuss, the hidden problems of domestic abuse. Why is it hidden? Karen?
Well, it really continues to surprise me, like you, for the same kind of reasons, because despite lots of awareness raising and work with young people and really trying to bring this subject out from behind closed doors, we know that the women that we work with will suffer abuse and harm for quite a long time before they seek help. And there's a kind of light bulb moment, I think, that they experience when they recognise what's happening to them as abuse. And that can take some time in a relationship. What's actually controlling behaviour can sometimes be, thought of as, well, he really loves me, he really cares about me, or he wouldn't want me to be with him all the time. Individuals who are experiencing abuse have a long process often to go through on their own to acknowledge what's happening as abuse, and that can be really a difficult thing to do. And then it's a difficult thing to decide to tell, and it's still as difficult as it maybe was years and years ago. There's a lot at stake. What will happen if I tell? What will the person I'll tell do? Will I actually be in more danger? And sometimes, unfortunately, that can be the result of disclosing. So there's all kinds of complex things going on, I think. But it just shows us that the whole awareness raising activity is really crucial, like this film, that we just keep plugging away and reaching out to people and letting them know that we're here for them.
Andy, is that your experience, that this hidden agenda, this hidden, it's typical in West of Scotland, maybe in Scotland, maybe the kind of keep it behind closed doors kind of psychology that's been bred into us. Would you agree with that, Andy?
Yes, and I think, Eddie, and I'm sorry, please, anybody watching, don't think I'm portraying myself as an expert on it. I just know people that have experienced it. And I'm fortunate enough to know people like Karen that I've got a passion in this. It's just to reinforce sometimes I think from a very young age we're brought up in the kind of Walt Disney version of things, kind of thing, in the loving relationship. And it's like what Karen says there is, people going through this, it's the isolation, and you take it upon yourself, and you hide it. Isabel, I think, in the discussion talks about hiding it for the kids. Kind of thing. You hide it for the kids, you hide it for your friends and family, kind of thing, and you take it all upon yourself, kind of thing. So I think it's things like Taylor's film and people putting themselves forward and showing the courage to keep it out there on the agenda. It's not just I think Taylor started off the film where it might upset some people, and it should, kind of thing. And I feel terrible actually saying that, but we have to keep this constantly on the agenda to give people the courage, anything, to take that step up and contact Karen or mention to people. So.
There is a kind of stigma. I mean, the stigma is attached to a lot of mental health issues, as you're probably well aware, and something like this is probably a mental health issue, quite a serious issue. And people sit behind the closed doors and don't come out. And because of social media, you would think something like social media would be a great outlet for somebody who's isolated in that house. They've been isolated probably before the COVID. And then when COVID arrives, it doubles that isolation or even more. Why do you not think that they open up more in something like social media rather than coming out to people like yourself in a support sense? Karen, what do you think?
Well, I think you're right. I think social media can be a really positive force for people to connect with one another, but it can be a kind of negative thing as well sometimes, and just the kind of behaviours you can sometimes see on different social media platforms. It's quite a risky business to use that as the platform by which you open up about something as sensitive as this. And I think for women living with domestic abuse like Isabel and Sharon, every day it's a constant sort of hyper-vigilant sort of state, and living with that fear and trying to minimise the harm and protect children from the impact is a draining, exhausting way to live, and definitely has impact on people's mental health, women's mental health. And I think when every decision you make is criticised or undermined, as it often is within a relationship where there's power and control, it's really hard to make life-changing decisions and take steps like that. So these are all factors that are at play, and we certainly Women's Aid and other services, we try and use every channel that's available to us to reach out. I mean, I think a really important one is, you've a few of you said tonight about that, people have spoke to you who've experienced it on the back of the film. And I think most people will talk to a friend or a family member or a neighbour before they talk to us, before they go on social media. So it's communities, as a whole, to be aware of it and how they can help. And that Women's Aid nationally and throughout the UK is involved in quite a lot of that, particularly in very, very rural parts of Scotland and up north, and different kinds of pieces of work to help communities respond, because that's probably who somebody, I think I probably would, I would probably speak to my friend before I spoke to, a police officer or a Women's Aid worker or something.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's where we can all play a role, play a part.
Do you feel that, Andy, as well? How do you feel that one of the difficult things for anybody trying to admit to something, whether it be domestic abuse or a mental health issue or whatever, is going to that door, looking at it and actually stepping in that door to go in and have that conversation with somebody like yourself, Andy? Do you find that that's a difficult part for people?
I think it is, Eddie, but I don't want to give them any impression that it's blaming the individual in the circumstance. I think it's only when you start to reflect and you watch films like Taylor and or speak to people like Karen, as you get a kind of basic understanding of how isolating it can be, kind of thing. It's not that it happens for half an hour in a day. It happens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the kind of powers exercised to isolate the individual from any sort of positive support network they have, kind of thing. And I wouldn't go onto social media, but the first thing is having the confidence to speak to a friend. But remember, somebody that's trying to control a relationship, that's the thing they cut away, kind of thing. So it's just constant, and you can imagine how easily it is to get into a very dark place. Whereas you stop thinking about yourself, you start thinking about the welfare of I think it was Sharon who said, our children. She worries about her children.
Taylor, throughout your film there, one of the kind of words that seemed to come out a few times was, and Andy actually mentioned it there, was the word control.
Yeah.
During your conversations, did you pick up on that?
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the things that really, I suppose, surprised me was speaking to the two women who did their interviews with me on film, was just the different circumstances. And Isabel particularly, that was for her, just since lockdown, that was her experience. It was really unusual. And she felt that she was basically, trapped as well. Her life was being, she mentioned that in the interview with me, that she'd basically confined herself to the bedroom because she was, in so much fear. And for her, I don't think for her, I don't think she felt like she was being controlled. But I think certainly she felt that she had no control over that situation because of the restrictions of COVID, but also because how her partner basically was responding to everything as well. So just hearing her speak as well, you can realise how much of a scary situation it must be, and how difficult especially in these circumstances, it must be for people to get help. And actually, one of the things that I spoke to Isabel about, or an idea that Isabel came up with, was actually a way of making it easier for women like her to get help. So I think when I was doing the interview with her, what she suggested, and there might be something like this already, Karen, you maybe know, but is like an app or something like that. That's I know in a lot of the, like your website, for example, Women's Aid and other websites like that, there's a quick link at the top, like take me away from this website, that basically redirects someone away. But an app or something that can basically just very subtly alert someone that I need help in whatever situation I'm, without a partner or anything knowing about it. Because I think that's what she was talking about, was an element of like who you text, who you're on the phone to. I think he would take her phone or look through her phone. So it needs to be a really like private and secure way of doing it to ensure the safety. But I thought it was a really interesting idea. Something similar to the Ask Angela scheme they do at like bars. You go up to the bartender and ask for Angela type thing. I thought that was an interesting idea.
That's a great idea, something to follow up. And Karen, I think, is that possible? Do you have something like that, Karen?
There's an app called Bright Sky. I mean, it's a sort of national. It just gives you, there's all kinds of information on it and details about local services that can help. So there's nothing more local than nothing particularly Scottish. Or one thing we're doing in East Ayrshire with health and housing, another agency, is looking at safe spaces for women to disclose. So maybe, there was a scheme ran at the very beginning of lockdown with Boots, where women could ask to speak to somebody privately, and they would then use the app that I talked about there to contact somebody to come in and support. So we're looking at something within existing services in East Ayrshire that women would probably be able to go to by themselves and would be unlikely to be accompanied by a partner, for those that are in the really, really kind of stuck and trapped situations where they simply can't make a phone call or speak to anyone. So we're looking at developing these safe spaces in East Ayrshire, really on the back of what we've learned or imagined what things are like for women experiencing domestic abuse during COVID. So there's bits of work going on nationally and locally to look at trying to just widen the range of options that women have to tell someone about it safely.
I think one of the things that struck me at the very beginning, that held me, Taylor, was the violent nature of the opening sort of scene. Was that something that was real, or was that acted out, Taylor?
That was actually fun enough. It was a bit of audio that I had from a project that I'd done with Women's Aid many years ago, actually. So it was done by 2 teachers, I think, to remember, Dalmellon Primary School at the time, as part of a kind of a drama project I'd done with Women's Aid. So it's very, very convincing, though, the audio.
Yeah, when I switched it on, and Julie, my wife, says, "What's that?" That was automatic, and it was a great way of opening it. And it's not a nice way to open anything, but it was a good way of attracting attention, I thought.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously it. And one of the things that I've learned throughout doing this as well is just how, that's obviously for me as a filmmaker a way to kind of grab, the audience's attention straight away. But a lot of the people I spoke to, the experience isn't just like a physical one. It can be very much an emotional or mental, psychological abuse. They don't even have to say it to you a lot of time. It could just be their actions towards you and stuff like that. And that's what really opened my eyes up in terms of the whole scope of it, because I have to admit myself maybe being just a bit naive and thinking, a husband hitting his wife, that's domestic abuse in my mind. But obviously the scope of that, it's so much more as well.
Can I go to the opening part as well, just after the dramatic intro? It was the family laws where Tony Bowen came on, and I was quite kind of taken aback when he mentioned there was a dramatic increase in the lockdown of, people coming to him to seek advice. I mean, Andy, do you find that you would use somebody like Tony Bone quite a lot over the past few months?
Yes, I see Tony on a regular basis, and I suppose this is where the kind of idea of it came out, and it was just talking to Tony, and I was quite surprised. It's not at the top of my kind of radar to look at. So when it went into lockdown, the same as everybody else, it kind of disrupted my life. But touch wood, I've got a very happy kind of home life, and when I was speaking to people, and I thought that sometimes you project your life onto everybody else, and it's just speaking to Tony, Cam, and others, as you can realise, no, that people aren't having the same experience. It's not just a slight bit of disruption to them, and it's for me, it was the courage kind of thing. How bad does it have to get when you're starting to, you're speaking to the lawyer and stuff, and people are having to make these decisions? So, and it was this, Tony's words, I think, was it went through the roof.
Yeah.
And I don't think he'll mind me saying he's not just, but he's taken on people since the lockdown, kind of thing. So, sadly, it's a kind of a growing aspect of employment, which is bad to say.
You wouldn't think, the legal side would come into it, Karen. I mean, but it's something you have to think about, isn't it? If once you've committed yourself to somebody like yourself and say, look, I'm experiencing domestic abuse and this is happening and I'm coming to you for some refuge and help, that you would say, well, you need to speak to a lawyer now. Mm-hmm. Do you find people resist that?
Not always. I think, there are so many different organisations and processes that families have to get themselves involved in to escape domestic abuse, and the legal system is definitely one of them. So if a couple own property or there's issues, child contact is a real thorny issue in terms of domestic abuse. And one thing we found actually during lockdown was how where women had escaped domestic abuse, but their kids were still having contact with their dad, that it became a whole kind of another way that they were, the abuse was almost continuing. They would keep children or say that they'd got the virus or rate them about all over different households, different things like that. So there's all kinds of ways that mums were really worried about contact with children. So that's one area where a solicitor would be involved. There's also the whole criminal law. If there's been a charge, if there has been abuse and there's been a charge made, or if a woman has what's called a non-harassment order or an interdict, which is an order to prevent future abuse from a partner or ex-partner. So all kinds of different things like that. Homelessness, housing, health. There's a whole sort of loads of different organisations that women have to kind of sort of contact, and one thing it's so important that they're all working well together, and that they're not having to go and tell their story over and over again to people who respond in different ways. So I think that's one thing that again we work hard at in East Ayrshire. There's a Violence Against Women partnership where all these agencies are represented, just to make sure that everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet and that there's no gaps in that sort of journey that families have to go on to get to safety. But yeah, sorry, I'm rambling on.
No.
There are all kinds of ways, but sometimes you can't always get legal aid for things.
Yeah.
That the kind of support that we get from somebody like Tony's not always available. So it can be quite difficult sometimes, but yes, invariably I think women have to be involved themselves with a solicitor at some point.
I know anybody sort of tuning in and watching this, obviously they can get in touch with you or even get in touch with you through your social media or your websites or telephone numbers. So we need to remind people that you are there almost constantly to support and help. I'm going to sort of touch on probably something maybe I won't sort of a prickly subject is maybe the types of violence. And now there is psychological violence or psychological sort of ways of dealing with people, and also there's the violent physical side. What happens most is it mainly physical, or is it the psychological side, or is it a mix of both?
I think it's usually a mix of both. And I mean, what we talk about now in Scotland is coercive control, and there was a new law passed quite recently to criminalise coercive control. So that's bringing in behaviours like psychological abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse, which can have as devastating an impact as physical and sexual abuse can. Some women experience the most extreme forms of physical violence and sexual violence. Other women experience years of abuse and never experience those, the kind of, and I suppose one thing, you know, maybe cynically, a physical assault, certainly not sexual violence so much when we've all read the news about the way that rape's prosecuted, but if you think about a physical assault, you're much more likely to be arrested if you physically assault somebody. And whereas it's much more difficult to prove the kind of mental and emotional abuse that so often characterises coercive control. So that makes it hard for you to do something about, and hard for you to even identify as a form of abuse. So I don't think one's more prevalent than the other. There are lots of women who don't experience physical abuse at all, but are still very much living with domestic abuse. And I guess it's important to say that you know, I think we're all pretty aware now that domestic abuse doesn't have to be physical to be for us to see it as the abuse that it is. And but unfortunately there are still women who live with that kind of control and think, well, it doesn't, you know, if I'm not being physically abused, then it can't be domestic abuse. So that's a really important message, I think, to get out, that it absolutely can.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, because people do say that, you know, that it's when you hear the word abuse, people tend to think violence, you know, physical. Whereas there's a variety. I see Andy, you're nodding your head a couple of times here, Andy. Yeah. Have you been experiencing, you know, both sides? Has it been difficult to deal with?
I think it's important what Karen said there is it's not just physical kind of thing. And I certainly don't want to say maybe that's sometimes easier and clear cut to deal with kind of thing. But I've worked with a lot of young people with abusive relationships and stuff like that in the past, and it was the emotional attachment kind of thing, and it's the mental stuff. Is if you experience violence with somebody that you've got a relationship with, and you've got a kind of in brackets loving relationship with, and you're sharing, that only needs to happen once. And then you'll be, I think Karen started off at the start about how people are hypersensitive and very attuned to changes in people's emotions. And that's why I'm very clear, as if it happens, it just needs to happen once kind of thing. And that's a kind of lifelong sentence for you. And it's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Isabel's was basically locked in the room for 3 weeks. That's no, you could say not getting beat up or anything, but scared to come out. That for me, it is one's as bad as the other kind of thing. It's the fact that it just doesn't switch off.
I'm going to come to a point you made earlier on there, Karen, talking about the support network. And I know when the councillor, Eleanor Whittam, had said that they worked really hard, you know, to sort of develop this sort of network to accommodate. And one of the things that they were looking at was like freeing up accommodation.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, does that help?
Well, that was amazing, because we have refuges, as most women's aid groups do, which are houses where women and their kids can live. Usually while they wait to be rehoused. as a result of, you know, they leave home because of domestic abuse, stay with us for a little while, and then they get a house on their own. That's the usual route by which families still have to, you know, they have to just pack up and go kind of thing. And that's as true now as it was, you know, maybe 25 years ago. But with lockdown, we all the services were shut down, so we were full very quickly, and there was no kind of through movement, if you like, because the houses, you know, the housing weren't able to allocate houses, and families weren't able to move on, and so the housing service in East Ayrshire, in the council's housing service, very quickly got a lot of temporary houses made available for that kind of temporary accommodation for families that might be in touch with us because of domestic abuse or became homeless for other reasons. I mean, I think they nearly doubled. I'm not, don't quote me on that, but I mean, they did that really quickly. That was actually really amazing how quickly everybody kind of just did what had to be done. You know, it was quicker than it usually is because of the circumstances, but the way everybody kind of rallied around it. When you come on to in the next film to look at things like food poverty and some of the challenges around that, that was another kind of, it happened really well, amazingly there as well. But yes, so we didn't, if a woman contacted us that because we didn't have a space for her, that we couldn't help, because that was put in place really quickly. So that was great. And all sorts of different things, different services that the families we work with would need were available in different kind of ways because of the restrictions that were on put in.
Taylor, during your filming experiences with this, on the very topic of networks, did you notice that there was quite a number of networks or different support groups out there to help?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the things that Eleanor Whitman mentioned when I was speaking to her as well, is the partnership, obviously, with Women's Aid and housing and things like that. And that's, as Karen says, obviously, it was really good at a time that it was really difficult but really necessary. In terms of other partnerships, speaking to some of the women as well, like obviously they said themselves, like having that help from Women's Aid, especially through the lockdown, was like a lifeline to them, because I think, you know, they're relying a lot of the time on Women's Aid to connect them up with other services. And at a time there when essentially a lot of services just said, all right, sorry, we have to close down for a while, Women's Aid, you know, adapted very quickly and they kept going. So I think that was really important. And in terms of other partnerships, obviously we kind of briefly touched on some ideas, but within the scope of the film, obviously we can only include so much. But
Andy, do we have enough resources, enough people out there? That's the $6 million question, isn't it?
Sorry, I would say that this is one of these situations as, are you ever going to have enough kind of thing? Are you ever going to meet the individuals? Do I think personally it's a high enough priority? And I mean, across the country, I would say, no, I don't feel that kind of thing just now. I would think we've got good examples in East Ayrshire kind of thing. And it's good to hear people like Karen say about the response rate and the quick turnaround. Sometimes I think it's very easy kind of forget how disruptive the lockdown was kind of thing. And it was, the priority was save lives kind of thing immediately for the COVID. Everything shut kind of thing. But the next day people are starting to think, okay, geez, how does this impact? People adapted. For me, it's about people with that commitment to make a difference. We can always do more kind of thing. Everything else is, we might think in East Ayrshire we've got a good model, we're going in the right direction, but there is nobody in East Ayrshire that says we can't improve on it kind of thing. And it's about using the skills, talents and stuff like that we've got in place. But you give us money, I give Karen money tomorrow, she'll come out with a good return on my buck. I think
Yeah.
The preventative stuff, I see a lot of stuff coming out of the Scottish Government that I can't possibly disagree with about the preventative investment and stuff like that. And am I frustrated sometimes about how that impacts in reality? Yes, kind of thing. But I think it's like people like us getting these messages out, people keeping at it. I think we're improving. Is it better than it was 20 years ago? Yes. Kind of thing. But let's keep going on it. Nobody's got to leave this tonight and be satisfied.
I remember way back in May, Taylor remember this, we did 5 mental health Zoom sort of sessions. It was chats with different people, and at the end of it we kind of said, what do you think is going to happen? Now that was May. We felt how the impact COVID was going to have on us in the future, and almost everybody was right. I mean, they were basically saying that there'll be high unemployment and there'll be more people made unemployed, and that means more stress, more anxiety, more mental health support. And also with children, the impact is going to have on them, because there's no resources or no places for them to go and play and enjoy. Now, have you noticed since, I know with the film Taylor's revealing this, the COVID impact, do you feel the COVID impact has been substantial in comparison to, say, January this year? Karen?
Yeah, I think I probably do. I mean, even from a personal level, you can feel it. I was just talking to my neighbour about that earlier on, actually. It's, it's kind of feeling a bit like a long haul now. But I mean, I was very worried about what would happen in terms at the end of the furlough and the families that would be plunged into poverty. I mean, I know that seems to have been, there's been a bit of a change there, but in the longer term, we are looking at more poverty. What's happened to young people, I think, is such a shame. It's such an important part in their lives, like you said, about children. I mean, we were really worried about when the children weren't at school, how we could offer support to children who were living with domestic abuse, because it's quite often through schools that, we'll get referrals for support for that. So that's, so you can, I mean, almost every part of the section of the community that you look at, you can see that this is going to have long-term effects and difficulties, as well as the sort of ongoing mental health stresses that you've already spoken about. It's not all going to disappear, once our life ever gets back to some kind of, what we were used to in the past. So yeah, I think there is a lot to think about, and I think that's why I've got to kind of watch out for the most vulnerable people, and for a wee while yet.
I know in North Ayrshire here, there's a lot of kind of mental health support groups all of a sudden appeared, but it was volunteer groups. It's people just doing it off the cuff. And one of the reasons, well, one of the main reasons why what we picked up was because there wasn't enough resources out there. They had to actually do it themselves. I mean, an example was I think is it Men's Work or something like that it's called. And in Inverclyde, it was a chap who set it up last year. And there's thousands upon thousands actually contact. He's actually got a call centre set up now, believe it or not. And it was all done because his dad was thinking of committing suicide, and he couldn't find anywhere to go. And so he says, the only way I'm going to do it is do it myself. And he set it up. With the situation, people being made more unemployed, the pressure on more people, we were discovering there that there were more volunteers wanting to set up something themselves and commit their own time. Do you feel that's something that should be looked at and supported over the next, say, 6 months or so? Andy?
Oh, I was hoping you would pick somebody else there.
Quiet Andy for a wee while there.
It's my background's community work. I believe in people self-organising. I believe in the community can is the start point for everything. It's about the relationships, the good neighbour, the kindness agenda. It's about people connecting with each other. Sometimes I think if you're waiting for someone else to do it, you could be waiting a long time. Anything. So I'm very much into let's get a couple of people together, and let's see what difference we can make ourselves on it. And it was, Karen talked earlier about the kind of quick response. The quick response wasn't down to policies and new legislation getting passed. It was down to people who care about it, identified the problem, spoke to each other and thought, I maybe can't change the world, but what I can do is this just now. I can implement this just now. Karen, could you use it? Andy, can you use it? So I'm very much as, no, I don't think most people have got a wee fear of what's coming down the line. Anything, we're having to change things, and things have been accelerated. A lot of kind of challenges in society has been exposed. It was always there. COVID has just accelerated it, or as Tony says, exacerbated some of the problems, but they were there. So I think, no, I'm very much, again, come on, folks. I was going to swear there, Taylor. I don't know. Get off your ass. Yes. But sometimes you just can't wait for. Yeah.
And Taylor, I'm just going to kind of round up probably over the next sort of 5 minutes or so. But one of the things that I felt in the video that it was kind of hidden in there, as you were saying, but was the medical side. Where doctor surgeries, psychiatric units, where do they fit into all this?
Well, I mean, for me, what I learned just going through this kind of journey and this process, I was like, it really is, like, it does involve everyone, it's everyone's problem. This is something that happens all across Scotland in all different communities, So I think the question that I kind of think I started to ask on my journey was, all right, how do you tackle this problem, or how do you solve this problem? How do you completely eradicate domestic abuse? But I think especially with my conversation with you, Karen, the first thing that really clicked with me was, okay, this is a problem, and there's loads of organisations and women's aids and stuff set up to help, but it's actually bigger than just like, one case. It's about equality and things like that as well. And that's where I think it's such a complicated issue, case by case. It's such a complicated issue. One woman who's experiencing domestic abuse in Glasgow can have a completely different situation from, somebody else experiencing domestic abuse in Edinburgh. And there could be all different, drivers of the abuse and different aspects of their life. They'll just be completely different people. But I think the one thing that we can control as a country, as a society, as a culture, is how we help people and how we treat the victims of domestic abuse, but also how we treat the abusers as well. So I think, Eddie, like things like doctor surgeries and anywhere like that, I know already they probably do. They get training. I remember one of the things we talked about before was that the college in Coinnin, your college in Coinnin, the hairdressers ones, that the trainee hairdressers. Yeah. As part of their training, they were taught to look out for the signs of domestic abuse, and I think it's all the things like that everyone has a kind of part to play, to look out for the signs, to support people, to come down hard on any sort of domestic abuse and really snap it out. And Elena said that as well when I was speaking to her. It's a culture thing, So even if it's in a setting that might be traditionally male dominated, any language that seeks to kind of basically diminish women in any sort of way shouldn't be tolerated at all.
I think maybe we'll finish off on that, but maybe quickly, Karen and Andy. Maybe Karen, firstly, if anybody is watching the programme just now and they feel that they need to reach out, I mean, what advice would you give?
Well, just to get in touch with Women's Aid. There's lots of different ways to do that. The National Domestic Abuse Helpline is free. It doesn't show up on your phone bill. But I think the most important thing to say is that we are there for you to take things at your own pace. Nobody's going to tell you what to do or ask you to do something that you don't want to do. It's just a safe place to talk about what's been happening and explore some of the steps you might want to take from this point on. And lots of women who've been in touch with us have turned their lives around and managed to escape what seemed like an impossible situation when they were in it, and that's true for everybody. So I just urge women to talk to somebody, talk to us, talk to, you know, there's any number of agencies that can help you, or people that can help you, and you know, it just means that you don't feel you're not as perhaps trapped as you believe you are, that you're not alone. I think that's the most important thing to get over.
Yeah. Andy?
I think I totally agree with what Karen is there. If anybody is watching this kind of thing, my thing would be speak to somebody, speak up, take that step. I would encourage you to kind of speak to Karen or organisations like Karen, where you've got that expertise. Appreciate that you're not going to be basically pressurised or forced into anything. It's people that are willing to listen to you and go at your pace. But it is that, please speak up. If anything else, I would just add, it's not just on the individual themselves having that opportunity to speak up. It's for the rest of us out there, kind of thing. As Taylor said at the start, that people might be upset by the film, but we should all be, kind of thing, in the clip. So it's for us all, whether you think it impacts on you or not. This is about what kind of society we want to become, and we actually all speak up on the topic.
Well, I would just like to sort of round off and say a huge thanks to Taylor for compiling such a what would you say? I'm trying to think of a word. I'd rather say shocking, because it did shock me to begin with, Taylor. But such a terrific video and the impact it has had, and I'm hoping that, you know, whenever the food one comes up as well, it'll have the same impact. And a huge thanks to everybody who's been involved with the video, Taylor, and Karen and Andy for coming on tonight and taking part in the conversation discussion. I would like to certainly see more of this, probably, in the future, and maybe sort of bring in more people who have been through something like that as well, maybe the same experience, and give them a voice on a programme like this. So on behalf of the Ayrshire Film Company, thank you very much to everybody, and thanks for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll see you all quite soon. See you later.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you.